Hello, listeners. I've been a little bit inactive recently. I've had a number of things going on. I'm still sick. This is turning into some sort of saga now. I think I'm on to my third or fourth course of antibiotics, and no one can really figure out what's going on. Also, I've been busy with a few other things. My wife and I went away, and actually, I'm going to talk about something that happened there. We went away for my wife's birthday last weekend. Uh, But I've actually recorded just a little while ago. I recorded another talk, which I'll probably upload tomorrow or the day after or something like that. It's a fairly long talk. I think it's about 75 minutes or 76 minutes, dealing with some different things. So I need to listen to it though. Maybe I'll re-record it. I'm not sure. But I wanted to tell a couple of tales from Taiwan in this particular talk here. I'm doing this whole thing off the cuff. I'm actually walking around the house as I'm doing it. I want to tell these two tales because they've very much been on my mind for the past week or 2 weeks since they each happened. I actually told a couple of people about the first tale I'm going to tell you, and I told one guy fairly soon after it happened because it really disturbed me, the thing that I witnessed. So I kind of want to get these off my chest. I've lived in Taiwan for almost 9 years now. This summer, the 27th of July, I believe, will be 9 years for me in Taiwan. And I go through periods where I think, yeah, I've figured everything out here. I know how this place works. I know what the people are on about. And then certain things happen and I think, no, I have no idea what's happening here. And these tales are kind of like that. So the first tale is that 2 weeks ago, I was out driving with my wife, and we were in a town near where we live, another town. We were at a red traffic light at a four-way intersection. A car rolled past us with the driver closer to us, his side of the car closer to us. He just sort of rolled through the intersection fairly slowly. And I noticed that he had a dog. He had a toy poodle. Little dogs are really popular in Taiwan, these little yappy, kind of highly strung, annoying dogs. People don't want big dogs that need a lot of exercise and so on because they don't have the time. A lot of people work long hours or they live in small apartments and so on. So these little dogs are very popular here. Maltese terriers, miniature schnauzers, chihuahuas, toy poodles. So he had a little toy poodle. It was a brown or apricot sort of colour, halfway between the two. And it was sitting on the door. And what I mean by sitting on the door, I don't mean with the rear legs on the armrest or on the driver's legs or anything like that. I mean actually sitting on the door. So the window was down. All four legs were balanced upon that top part of the door into which the window retracts. So, that's only, 8 centimeters, 10 centimeters wide or something. So, 3.5, 4 inches. So imagine this little dog sitting on that door. And you can probably guess where this is going to go, right? But it's the telling of the tale, I suppose, right? You know what the outcome's going to be. So he went through the intersection, and then very soon after that, the light turned green, and we turned around and went after him. And we were the next car behind him. And I was just following him. And this was one of these instances where I really wish that I had a dashboard cam. These things happen, and I always say to my wife, I've got to get a dashboard cam because, I see these things, just insane, some of the crazy driving and other weird stuff that we see here. And I could go on at length and tell many tales about some of the things I've seen or experienced driving here. And I always say that, and then we forget about it, and we don't get a dashboard cam, and then something like this happens, and we have the same conversation again. So we're following this guy for probably 3, 4, 5 kilometers, something like that. There's a long street stretch out of the town. So we're just behind this guy, and I was just doing a running commentary the whole time, going, "Look at this guy, what a moron!" Right? It just, oh my God, how has this dog never fallen out of this car if he does this all the time, and so on and so forth. Pardon me. And then we went up onto a kind of overpass. Coming the other way, the road split and one part goes underneath and the other goes over. So we were going over the overpass. And near the end of the overpass, it curves and goes down towards the left. So they have a section, and they have these in many places in Taiwan, that a section separating both sides of the road with pylons, plastic pylons. They're sort of like poles, maybe waist high, hip high, and spaced every few meters. And it's to stop people from overtaking on that section, because Taiwanese would. It's a really stupid idea to overtake on a section like that, but they do and would. In other places they do. So there are all these pylons. So this guy was in front of us, and he got to where the pylons were. And I mean, imagine these pylons. If you ran into them with your car, it wouldn't be very good for your car, but no one would die if you did that. Maybe that's why they have those rather than an actual barrier. So he got to the pylons, and then he spat out the window, and my eyes kind of followed the spit down to the road. And just as I looked up, the dog was airborne. I didn't see how the dog, or why. I don't know if the dog being airborne had any connection to the guy spitting, if he knocked the dog or the dog turned or something. But anyway, the dog had lost its balance and it was airborne. So I saw this poodle pirouetting through the air on the horizontal axis, so kind of the head and the tail, like it was chasing its tail, right? Doing that through the air and kind of watching this like, oh my God. And it didn't take very long for this to occur, obviously, but everything sort of slowed down. It was like time slowed down. And then it hit one of the plastic pylons, it bounced off the plastic pylon and then hit the bitumen and kind of rolled a bit. As soon as it hit the ground, it started making this really horrible sound. I don't know if you've ever witnessed a dog being hit by a car. I have, and a non-fatal collision. Where they sort of like get hit in the rear end or something like that, and they'll be crippled from it. The sound that they make, the yelping sound, is horrible when they're in severe pain, not just a little bit of pain. Not like, if you step on your dog's foot or something and it yelps. Not like that. It's a different sound. It's more intense than that. The dog made that sound, and I thought, this dog's really little. It's probably 3 kilos, 4 kilos, right? And we were doing about 60 kilometers an hour at this point. I mean, I've come off a scooter at lower speeds and had to have physiotherapy and been all grazed and had and had a shoulder that didn't have full mobility for months and all of this sort of stuff. Here's a little dog, 3 kilos, 4 kilos, hits the ground. I mean, it's going to be really messed up, right? Hence the yelping, of course. The guy pulled over and we went past him because we couldn't exactly stop on this overpass. There was a lot of traffic and stuff. And my wife said, the guy's laughing. And I don't know why. We drove along further and then it occurred to me suddenly, that was the driver. Because I don't know what it was. Maybe I got confused. I thought it was an Australian car or a British car, a Japanese car or something where the driver sits on the other side of the car. Because I guess I just assumed that no one could be that stupid to drive with the dog sitting on the window next to them, on the door next to them. I thought maybe it would be the passenger or something who would try to hold the dog or grab the dog or something. I don't know. But it suddenly dawned on me, and I actually said to my wife, "That guy was the driver." And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "I thought he was a passenger because I didn't think anyone could be that stupid." Because it was really bizarre. I mean, imagine he could have had an accident if the dog had fallen down on his lap suddenly or jumped on his neck or something. He could have lost control of the car and gone off the overpass, right? I mean, I don't know what the barrier of the overpass, the sort of external barrier is like, but potentially he could have had a very serious accident. Really stupid. And then my wife and I were discussing this because we were both like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Because, we were up to that point, we thought maybe this guy, like it's not going to happen. I mean, it is going to happen, but surely we're not going to see it happen. At some point in the future, this dog is going to fall out of the car. We're not going to be the ones to see it, right? But we were. And so we were really surprised, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the whole way for the next few kilometers. And then I was saying to my wife, what's going to happen to that dog? Because we're in the countryside, we live in the countryside, and we were probably an hour, maybe more, from the nearest vet. And I think this was on a Sunday, so there might not even have been a vet open. And also the kind of guy who's going to do that kind of thing with a dog, I imagine that if he somehow did retrieve the dog and then go to a vet, the vet would say, well, you're probably just going to have to euthanize the dog because it would have been really badly injured, like multiple fractures and probably internal organ damage and all of that sort of stuff. The best thing is to euthanize the dog. I mean, would he even go there because, what would the vet say to him? How did this happen? Or the vet might say, well, I can try to fix up your dog, but it's always going to be crippled and so on and so forth. And then the vet bills would be probably a lot more than the cost of a new dog, a multiple thereof. That kind of guy is going to say, I'll just get a new dog, right? And my wife said it's probably not even his dog. It might be his friends or his girlfriends or something. I mean, I don't know how he would have explained that to them. But I said, well, he's just going to dump it by the side of the road. Because what's he going to do with it, right? He's going to have this dog that's going to be yelping and it's going to be beside him and he's going to be looking at it and it's going to be all messed up. He's just going to dump it by the side of the road. About an hour or so later, we came back the same way and we had to go over that overpass. So as we went there, I slowed down and kind of looked around that area, both before the overpass and on the overpass. It wasn't there. I mean, he probably dumped it somewhere, probably just turned down a country lane somewhere and just dumped it there. I mean, it's really screwed up. And I see these things sometimes with driving and I just think, what was that guy thinking? How did he think that was going to turn out? What was the outcome of that going to be? Whether it was today or, that day, that Sunday, the following day, the day after that, a week, a month, a year later, what were the odds of that? But then you see people doing all sorts of crazy stuff here. I could tell a million stories about the driving. It's just one of those instances of where, I've lived in this place for almost 9 years, and I think I've got everything figured out, and I think I know how people think here, and I think I know how this place operates, and I know some people here who are very intelligent and who are very aware of these kinds of things. But man, there are some really dumb people here, like really dumb people, and they don't have any kind of understanding about risk and danger and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes these kinds of things just really freak me out. And for the next few days, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you've seen something that's kind of intense, and when you close your eyes, even if you're awake, if you just sort of close your eyes for 3 seconds, you see that image. So for the next, 2 or 3 days, every time I closed my eyes, I had this poodle pirouette. I still have it if I think about it. I can still see that image of that poodle pirouetting through the air, spinning slowly. It's like out of a movie or something. And I would lie in bed at night trying to sleep, and I'd have that image of that poodle pirouetting through the air. It was horrible. Pardon me. So that's the first story. The next story, it does also involve some cruelty, and it's not so much negligence, but it's more just a surreal story. The cruelty is not really that integral to the whole thing. So I mentioned earlier that we went away for my wife's birthday, and we did various touristy things, restaurants and some other places. Our kid managed to throw up after every meal on the first day. We went on some winding roads, and literally, literally 20, 30 minutes after we'd eaten, he threw up everywhere, all over himself, the car seats, the car. It's horrible. He did that 3 times. The third time we were actually in the hotel. He threw up there for dinner. So anyway, there was a place that we've been near the place where we went for the holiday many times, and we've driven past there many times. And every time we used to drive past there, drive in that vicinity, we would drive past a particular place, and it was some sort of, from the outside, it looked like some sort of a theme park type experience. And it was in the middle of nowhere. It's in the countryside, near this place, and they had a big sign, or have a big sign out the front with dinosaurs and monkeys. There might be some other stuff, but I remember the dinosaurs and the monkeys. And the dinosaurs, I was really into dinosaurs when I was a kid. I really liked them, and I used to collect model dinosaurs and so on. And my father used to take me to the museum and see dinosaur skeletons and that kind of thing. So I was really into them. And they're pretty cool, dinosaurs. And monkeys for me, I don't know what it is about them. Well, firstly, there's a movie called Monkey Shines. I don't know if any of you have seen that. I think it's from the 80s. It's a very disturbing movie about a guy. I think he's running at the start and he has an accident and he ends up paralyzed. His friend suggests that he get a little monkey companion to keep him company and to help him. And this monkey then, it turns into a kind of thriller horror type story. This monkey does all these horrible things, and this paralyzed guy has to try to somehow fight the monkey. It's a very disturbing movie. I saw that as a teenager, and I think it's stuck with me ever since. I'm fascinated and disturbed simultaneously by monkeys. On the one hand, they're very human. There's something about them. They're like little people, and they're very funny and interesting, but at the same time they're quite disturbing. There's something almost evil about them. I don't know what it is. So I have this very strange love-hate relationship with monkeys, a fascination with monkeys. And I'm not really talking about wild monkeys, although there was an incident once. We were in Indonesia. My wife tried to pull a monkey's tail and it almost bit me instead of her. So that probably adds to the whole thing. I'm not really talking about wild monkeys so much. There are wild monkeys near where we live. If we go hiking near where we live, we'll see or hear monkeys almost every time. I'm talking about sort of trained monkeys, circus monkeys, zoo monkeys. They're at once intriguing, perplexing, disturbing, horrifying to me, and I can't look away from them. So every time I used to drive past this place, I'd say, "Oh, wow, I wonder what that place is like." So for my wife's birthday, I think she thought it would be fun as well. She said, "Oh, I know this place we'll go to, but I won't tell you where it is. I'll just tell you how to get there." So we're driving, and she's like, "All right, go here." I was like, "Oh, it's the monkey place, is it?" And she said, "How'd you guess?" And I said, "Well, because of where we are, there's nothing else around here. It can only be that." And she said, "Yes." So we went in there and we parked the car. It was a huge place. It had multiple buildings. There was an enormous museum. There was the place where they did the monkey show, and then there was some water bottling plant. I don't know what that had to do with anything. So we went over to the museum first because the monkey show wasn't going to be for another hour or hour and a half or something. So we went to the museum, and it was an enormous building. There weren't that many tourists there. In the morning, there were probably a dozen or so tourists. I think they were all part of one group. There might have been some other individuals. Oh yeah, there were some other individuals. And when we got in there, I was really pumped because I was like, wow, the monkey place, like the monkey and dinosaur place, this is going to be fantastic. Probably horrifying as well, but also fantastic. And I thought, this is cool. And when we went in there at first, the museum, it had a lot of staff. It had enormous dinosaur skeletons and several levels. and all these exhibits with like giant maps and pictures of the solar system and giant models of the solar system and all this kind of stuff. And so at first I was really pumped. I was like, wow, this is cool, right? This museum is really cool and it's in the middle of nowhere. And it was privately built. Supposedly some businessman had made a whole lot of money a couple of decades ago and he just decided to build this place. So at first I was really excited, and they had interactive things and rides and stuff like that indoors. So I was like, wow, this is cool. So we went to some of these things. As everything kind of wore on, I became more and more disillusioned, which is often the way with me in Taiwan with some of these things, because they tend to be a little bit strange. So we went to these different kind of there were sort of like experiences, environmental experiences. So the first one we went to was experience a typhoon, and I'm not really sure why you would want to experience a typhoon, because there are multiple typhoons every summer in Taiwan. Like there'll be one probably in a month or so here, and there'll be 3 or 4 just this summer, and you experience them. It's windy, it rains an enormous amount, small trees get blown over, signs get ripped off buildings, that kind of stuff, right? Everyone experiences typhoons. I don't know why you would want to experience one, at a place. And what it was actually just a wind tunnel, and you had little nets behind each person. There were sort of like booths. They were kind of open, of course, but you had a net behind you, and then you had a handle to hold on to. I mean, you weren't going to get blown around or anything, because you'd have to be really dumb and try to let go and try to walk around to get bowled over. And right at the back of the room there was a big net as well, in case anyone was that stupid. So it was just a wind tunnel, and the wind was really strong, but that's all it was, right? It wasn't anything more than that. So I thought, all right, okay. And for each of these interactive experiences, they had a guy there who would operate them, and he would do an announcement, the whatever thing is going to be in 1 minute or whatever, and so everyone would go to these things, and there were sort of 4 or 5 of them, so there was one every 10 or 20 minutes. So the next one we went to was an Arctic experience, and as we were walking there, I said, there are going to be penguins. Absolutely, there are going to be penguins, and of course, the Arctic doesn't have penguins. It's the Antarctic that has penguins. But I said, there are going to be penguins, for sure there will be penguins. And of course there were penguins, right? And polar bears. But so you had to go into this room to have an Arctic experience. And I thought, well, I don't know, like they'll have models of something in there. I don't know what they'll have, an igloo or something like that. Just any sort of stereotypical kind of cold stuff. I don't know. And being Taiwan, there'll always be some random thing in there as well. Like there might be like a guy in Lederhausen or something, just like, something like they'll go, oh, well, that's from a cold country, so we'll just throw that in there, right? So I was expecting something like that, like some Santa's elves or something, right? And we walked in there, and it was this enormous room. It was really cold. It was just basically like a meat locker. There were 2 really solid doors, metal doors, and there was nothing in the room. It was just an empty room, but it was really cold, and it had like fake snow on the floor or something. I was like, that's it? That's the Arctic experience. So anyway, as this kind of wore on, I started to become more and more disillusioned with this. So then later on we went to another interactive experience, and it was an earthquake experience. So we sat, it was like a platform with rows of seats and handles and stuff, and you'd sit on the platform, and it would just shake a bit, right? And they had things that would kind of move up and down from the ceiling, rocks, and they told some lame story about a girl in an earthquake or something. And then they had a waterfall where, when the earthquake happened, an enormous amount of water came out of the wall. It was something about when there's an earthquake, all the water comes out of the rocks in the mountains. That was the experience. And so we're like, okay, all right. So we left, and then we wandered around a bit. We had a look at a few different things. And then it was time for the monkey show. That was in another building, the monkey pavilion, or whatever you call it. So we went to there, and I was pretty keen to see the monkeys. So we went in there, and we sat down. Near us, there was a family. They had been part of a tour group who had said, look, we don't have time to wait around for this. So they said, all right, we want to see the monkey show, so just go off and pick us up on the way back. So they were waiting there too. So it was just me, my wife, and our son, and then a family with a young daughter, I think it was. It might have been a son, I can't remember. A small child also. So 6 of us just waiting there. And there were curtains at the front of the stage, and they were closed. We could hear people walking around, and one guy peeked out at one point, and then we heard, a couple of minutes later, we heard them bring the monkeys out, and I was like, wow, the monkeys. And we were waiting, and we looked at the time, and the show was meant to start, and we were waiting and waiting. They were waiting for another tour bus to arrive. Anyway, so they delayed the show. So, there was this sense of anticipation that was building, that I was going to see the monkeys. And finally the bus arrived, but only about 10 or 15 people came in. I don't know if the rest of them didn't want to see the monkeys, or if those were the only people. So in total there were maybe 20 of us sitting in a relatively large room. It probably could have seated well over 100 people. And then they decided to start the show. So a young guy came out. There were 2 assistants. There was one who didn't really do very much, but there was one other guy. He looked like it was just like a summer job or something for him. He was this kind of chubby university age student type guy, and he was very jolly. He didn't really seem to know what he was doing, and he kind of said a couple of words and then introduced the monkey handler, I guess, the monkey wrangler. So this guy came out, and he was quite an old guy, and he was really badly dressed, and he had this really strange comb over, and he had zero charisma, this guy. And he came out, and every time he interacted with the audience, as I said, he had zero charisma, and he sort of berated or cajoled the audience each time. The whole thing began really badly. I was like, what's going on here? And they brought out the monkeys. He came out with some, and then one of the assistants came out with some other monkeys. And they're wearing these really bad outfits. And I saw a picture of Wukong. Wukong is monkey. Some of you may know the story Journey to the West, or know of it. Those of you in Australia, that show Monkey Magic is based upon the story Journey to the West, which is it's one of the Chinese classics. It's a story about a Buddhist monk who is accompanied by various animal spirits, one of whom is, and they have this whole thing about how they get up to mischief and why they get roped into this quest at the beginning of the story. And then they all have to travel to accompany and defend this Buddhist monk to India to retrieve some Buddhist scrolls and then return them to China. And so those of you who have seen that TV show from the late 70s and early 80s, Monkey Magic, that's about Journey to the West, and the main character, Wukong, the protagonist, the Monkey King. This was meant to be about him getting a new wife. I don't really know what that was about. So the monkeys were wearing different costumes. One of them was, because there was a picture. That's how I knew it was about Wukong, because there was a picture of Wukong. And he's a fairly popular figure. You see him around at various places, pictures of him, because it's one of the Chinese classics, right? And it's an interesting story and so on. So you see pictures of him, so he's pretty recognizable. So that's how I knew it was about that, and then my wife told me, what it was going to be about. So these monkeys were wearing costumes. There were about 5 or 6 monkeys. I think there were 6. They were wearing costumes, but the costumes were really shabby. There was one in a dress, and then the others were wearing, like, the Monkey King was wearing like a kind of a leopard skin loincloth or something. And they had, the monkeys didn't like the costumes. They kept trying to take the costumes off and throwing them away and stuff. The monkeys generally weren't happy. And that sort of, I was very displeased about that whole sort of thing. The monkeys looked very stressed. They were on leashes. They kept grabbing the leashes so that the guy couldn't pull them. And they would jump up and down. And there was this whole kind of routine between them where I don't know whether it was part of the act or whether it's because the monkey was actually genuinely stressed. I suspect the latter, but where the guy would kind of berate the monkey, like he'd sort of like bark an order at the monkey and do this kind of hand movement and stamp his feet and get very frustrated, and then the monkey would kind of return in kind, and they'd have this little interaction every so often. I suspect it was just because each monkey wasn't particularly happy, but it may have been part of the show. I don't know, because this guy was just so uncharismatic, and because of other things that happened in the show, which I'll get to in a moment. So I don't know what any of this had to do with the story of Wukong and all of that, and the tricks were really lame tricks, and sometimes the monkeys refused to do them. There's one, it took the guy probably 5 minutes to get one of the monkeys to do a 30-second trick, because the monkey just flatly refused to do it, and he had to keep berating it, and the monkey would get annoyed at him, and and it was like, what is this? It's really bad, it's really lame. And even when the tricks worked, they were really lame. And at one point, there was sort of, I think he was meant to be Wukong. I'm not sure, because there were two kind of big males, but one of them, I think he was the alpha male. He just sort of he got free and he just ran away to the other side of the stage. He was running around the stage, and I was thinking, grief, what if it runs into the audience or something, right? I don't know. That's probably unlikely, but he was running all over the place. So the monkey wrangler was trying to kind of half chase him and half cajole him into returning. Eventually the monkey did return. It overturned a few things, had a bit of a tantrum, and then it came back and, finally convinced it to do its trick. And they got a different monkey and did a different trick with that. But there was one bit in the act, and you may wonder what the kind of image is for this video. I always have an image for each video. Some of you may know what this is from. Others may have no idea what this is from and think, what the hell does this have to do with anything? It's from a movie called Blue Velvet, a David Lynch movie from the 1980s, I believe, starring who is it? Kyle MacLachlan and what's his name? Dennis Hopper, Isabella Rossellini, and Dean Stockwell. And it's a very surreal, it's David Lynch, right? It's a very surreal movie, very disturbing as well. A lot of it's quite creepy. I saw this as a teenager and it freaked me out then, and it's still, I just watched the clip of that actually, because I actually recorded another version of this. I'm re-recording it. So I just watched that clip to remind me of this, because I thought of this when I first recorded this. And I want to mention it again, because the next thing that happened in this monkey show, it was very surreal, and it reminded me afterwards. I was thinking about this afterwards, and I kept thinking about it and thinking about it more and more and more, and it disturbed me the more I thought about it. The whole show, but this one point, it was unintentional, but it was kind of the high point or the low point, depending on how you want to imagine it. This point in the show, it was about halfway through the show, because the whole show was about 40 minutes. And prior to the show beginning, I thought, wow, this is going to be cool, 40 minutes. But once I was actually there, and once the show began, I thought, grief, I'm going to be here for 40 minutes. I can't leave because there are, 20 people or fewer. There's no way I was in the front row as well. There's no way I can leave, right? I'm here for the duration. So the monkey wrangler wanted a volunteer from the audience to interact, to do one of the tricks. And, if you're going to get a volunteer from the audience in any show, firstly, you have to be really charismatic, because you have to make the person feel like it's a good idea for them to come up. They're not going to embarrass themselves, let alone get hurt or anything, right? So you have to be very charismatic and get them pumped up and so on. But also, if you're interacting with animals, if you're doing anything with animals, you have to have to convince them that then something really bad is not going to happen. They're not going to get bitten, right? So you have to be charismatic, and you also have to pick your mark, right? And this guy was not charismatic, and he did not be his mark. He chose a woman. She was probably about 40, thereabouts, and she was relatively attractive for that age. She was wearing a really short skirt. I don't know why she was wearing a really short skirt doing tourism, but you see that from Taiwanese. They do, you'll see people at the beach wearing high heels and stuff like that. But so she was wearing a short skirt, this middle-aged woman, and she's in reasonable shape. Like a lot of Taiwanese middle-aged women, they're not fat. So he probably just chose her because she was like the sexy woman in the audience or something, right? I don't know what the deal was. So he got this woman up, and the thing that he wanted her to do was to throw a basketball to a monkey. The monkey was going to catch the ball, run along, leap onto a small platform, and then leap from that platform and slam dunk the basketball. It was a normal sized basketball into a hoop. It was probably a very simple thing for the monkey to do, right? It wasn't, the distances involved weren't large or anything like that. It was going to be an easy thing, and all she had to do was throw the basketball. But he didn't convey that very well. My wife kept saying even she couldn't understand what this guy was talking about. So the woman was probably worried that she had to actually really physically interact with the monkey, not just throw it a ball, but it was going to be on her, or she was probably confused. So she just said no, right? And she was shaking her head, and so then he was getting very frustrated, and he started berating her. So she just doubled down and just like, no way. She's just shaking her head, and her whole body language, crossed arms, the look on her face, everything was just saying no way, right? And this went on not just for seconds, this went on for probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes of him berating her and her just saying no, and back and forth. And by this stage I was sitting there kind of slack-jawed, like, what is going on here? This is so bad. And so finally he took a different tack, right? Now, I don't know if this was his original intention or what, right? But he took her over to the other side of the stage. And she was on ground level, and he was up on the stage, and he started doing this dance, like he was kind of twerking. And I was like, what? And then he told her she had to do it, and at first she was like, no, but somehow he just kept berating her. And I don't know, this is like a Taiwanese thing. I guess you just shame people into doing what you want. So she started doing it, and this went on for a couple of minutes. I was like, what is going on here? And, with these two, this old dude, very uncharismatic with this bad comb over and these shabby clothes. And I don't know what the monkey was doing at that point. I think he tied it up somewhere. And this middle-aged woman in a mini skirt, and they were twerking, and I was like, what is going on? It's weird. And so, if this whole thing had been filmed at night, it could have been out of a David Lynch movie. Later on, I thought of that scene in Blue Velvet where Dean Stockwell lip syncs that Roy Orbison song, and they take Isabella Rossellini into a back room to visit her kid who's been kidnapped or something, and all these other people hang around and dance, and Kyle MacLachlan kind of watches in horror or something. It was, that's a very weird scene, that scene from that movie. The whole thing was kind of very David Lynch-esque, but not in a good way. And I was thinking that, like, whoa, what is going on? And so finally, they stopped twerking, and then I don't know how, he convinced her to throw the basketball to the monkey. The monkey caught it, it ran, it jumped, it slam dunked the basketball. That was it, right? That was the end of it. But it took 10 minutes to actually just get it to do this 10-second thing, a 3-second thing, whatever it was, a second and a half. And I was like, oh, that was weird. And then they did a whole bunch of other tricks, and then it was pretty lame. And then it just ended. The whole show just kind of ended. I don't know what connection any of that had to do with Wukong, or, any of that stuff. And then the chubby assistant came out and kind of laughed and smiled and stuff. And they should have got him to interact with the audience, because he was kind of, there was something something nice about him. He was kind of a genial, congenial fellow or something. Pardon me. He was this sort of congenial figure, and he had some level of charisma. He wasn't weird, I guess. That was, better than nothing, right? Just not being weird is better than being weird. And he was sort of a nice enough guy. They should have got him to do it, but he said a few words, and then they closed the curtains, and it was like, right, everyone out of the room, right? And so we went outside, and I was like, don't know what I thought about that. It was a bit weird, and the monkeys were very unhappy. So then we went back to the museum because we hadn't seen everything. The museum had multiple floors, so we wandered around. There were a few more interactive things that we hadn't been on. Or there was one, and it was something to do with space. They had a big hall with pictures of the planets and like a cross section of the Earth's core and all of that sort of stuff. And I was in a slightly bad and disturbed mood from the whole monkey show. And I started to get more frustrated with this whole place because I started to notice that a lot of the factual information they had there was inaccurate. So they had a big map of the world, and it's not just that some of the borders were slightly inaccurate or something. They had extra stuff. So there was a whole archipelago of islands off the coast of South Africa. I'm not talking about Madagascar or like the Comoros Islands. There was a whole other archipelago, including one very large island off the south coast of South Africa that doesn't exist. And I was like, what? And there was all this kind of stuff or inaccurately spelt names, English names. They had a big room full of random pictures of Westerners with one or two Asians in there. I don't know what the common theme was. I couldn't draw out any common theme. I think some of them were scientists, but they weren't all scientists. Some of the names were spelt incorrectly and so on. And other things like that, I started to notice various things that were inaccurate. So, that always kind of rubs me the wrong way if I'm at a museum or something and something's not correct. So then we went into a room that was, it was meant to be a planetarium. And they said, all right, there's an interactive ride here. So we went and sat on some chairs. It was a similar thing to the earthquake room, where there were two platforms with rows of chairs, and one of the guys just operated it, and it was only us. And it was going to be like you were traveling in space. So, the platform would tilt and shift forwards or backwards, all of that kind of stuff, right? Imagine, you're in a spaceship or something. And so they had a big screen in front of us. And my wife said, can we take the kid on? Because he's not much older than a year, he's 15 months or something. And the guy's like, yeah, look, it'll be fine. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. It's it's nothing. So we got on there, right? And it was insane. This thing, it was like being on a roller coaster. This thing was just moving really violently, so much so that my wife actually pulled a muscle in her leg trying to brace herself and our son. So she was holding him, trying to prevent him from getting whiplash, and holding on with one arm to the rail. And then I wrapped myself around both of them and was trying to prevent my son from getting whiplash and to help my wife in this. And both of us were holding on for dear life. This thing was shaking us around. It was like being in a car accident or something. And we're like, this is really unenjoyable. We're like, oh, this is horrible. And periodically I would look up at the screen, and it was meant to be like you're traveling through space or something, but it wasn't really. They just had all this random stuff in there. And the graphics were, the movie or whatever that you were viewing, it looked like a video game circa 1991. Imagine that level of graphics. It was terrible. And this thing went for 2 minutes or something, and we're holding on for dear life, thinking, God, when is this going to end? And then it did, and we're just sort of like, what was that? So we left, and then we went upstairs, and they had so the middle level was to do with more space stuff. And they had a UFO, an enormous UFO, and you could walk inside the UFO. There are all these things on the way to the UFO about aliens and the different drawings of aliens, and something about UFO sightings, and none of it was like from some guy in Kentucky or something, right? It was UFO sightings in China and Russia, and all of this was purely speculative. So then we went into the UFO, and they had all of these like alien corpses in cases, plastic viewing cases around the walls, and I was like, what is this? It was like they'd got set pieces, leftover set pieces from not even the X-Files, some sort of C-grade 1960s alien movie or something, right? They were really bad, and then here's just like a rant. This is really kind of typical of how these things are in Taiwan when you go to these things. That it's sort of a case that you could view from above. It just had heads of aliens in it, right? 4 or 5 alien heads, or 4 or 5 heads. But like the third or fourth one it looked like a head of a terracotta warrior, some ancient Chinese guy. It was just, I don't know what that had to do with anything. It's like alien head, terracotta warrior head, alien head. And I was like, what is this place? It's so weird. And it's not even C grade, it's like D, E, F, G grade or something, right? It's so bad. This place, it's kind of, I don't know, it's gone to kitsch and back again and back to kitsch again. It's, I don't know, it's really weird, right? So then we went upstairs, and they had all this prehistoric stuff, and they had some fossils there and stuff. And then they had a section with dinosaurs. And so I went in there, and the good thing to come out of this was I learned the names of some dinosaurs in Chinese. But they had a display with different model dinosaurs. Some of them were sort of, they had the same dinosaur, but in different sizes. So they had, like a stegosaurus that was 5 centimeters high, but then elsewhere they had a stegosaurus that was 20 centimeters high, and, the same for other, Triceratops or Tyrannosaurus Rex or Brontosaurus or something like that. So they had these, they were plastic dinosaurs. They were these sorts of dinosaurs you would buy for your kid at a shop. And at one point my wife came over and I said, I think I used to have that dinosaur. And she said, what, that kind of dinosaur? I said, no, that exact dinosaur, that exact plastic dinosaur. Because I remember when I was a kid, my plastic dinosaurs were made in Taiwan. It's like, no, I had that exact dinosaur. And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. It's like, this is it at this big museum. They had 20 plastic dinosaurs, right? It was, as I said, it was like it had gone to kitsch and back again, and then back to kitsch. The whole thing was just really surreal. And so we kind of wandered around there, looked at the remainder of that, and then we went out and we left, and there was no one else. We were the only ones there. Because by this time it was kind of late morning. We were the only ones. It was like a ghost town in there. And afterwards I was thinking about this for the whole day. And then I was thinking about other places I've been to, good and bad, and so on and so forth. And I didn't know what to make of this. It was very strange. It was, I couldn't figure it out. What was going on with the whole thing, and how they made any money from this place, and all of this, and what the inspiration for it was, and why the terracotta head with the aliens in the case. There was all this stuff. It was very perplexing, and for a while I was really depressed because I was like, man, this is our vacation. This sucks. Then I was kind of very pensive, very reflective on the whole thing, and thinking about other travel experiences I've had. And then I was thinking, a lot of my favorite places that I've traveled to were places that I actually really hated at the time. They were really bad experiences, but they grew on me, or they took on a kind of a mythology of their own. And and it's very strange, this feeling. I don't know why, but thinking about it now, I have this kind of smug satisfaction that not just that I'm telling this story to you, but that I've been witness to something that you guys will probably never see. It was so bad it was good, and it's like it's my secret little place that I've been to or something. It's very weird. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was really, the monkey show was awful and surreal, both. And the museum was just really weird. The Arctic experience and the space ride where a kid almost got whiplash and just all this stuff. That made no sense at all. A new archipelago off the coast of South Africa, but it was also awesome. And it's one of those things that, like I said right at the beginning of this talk, so I'm coming up for 9 years in Taiwan, and just when I think I've figured this place out, just when I think I've figured these people out, I have these kinds of experiences, and at the time I think, this sucks. But then in some strange way, this is also why I like living in Taiwan. I can't quite put my finger on it. Things don't make sense, but they're actually really cool in retrospect, or they're fun or funny or something. I don't know. It's very difficult to articulate what I feel about this. But that story, and also the one about the pirouetting poodle, they've both very much been on my mind since they occurred. And this one, I don't think I've told anyone about this story, the museum and the monkey show story. But I wanted to get them off my chest because I don't quite exactly know what to feel about them, or why I feel what I feel. So anyway, as I mentioned, I'm going to upload some other stuff in the next day or two. But I thought that maybe this would be an interesting interlude. If you have your own surreal stories about tourist destinations that you've been to that didn't quite turn out how they should have, particularly if they were surreal, please let me know. I love these kinds of stories. I really sort of enjoy gonzo style journalism, or gonzo style travel, rather than just everything sort of going according to plan and being very predictable and normal and so on. I'm very fascinated by that sort of stuff. So please, if you have any of your own wacky stories, do tell me in the comments below, or otherwise write other comments. And as always, thanks for listening.